Hello everybody, I'm Butch Stearns.
And I'm Scott Liewehr.
And welcome to the latest edition of CMS-Connected, the web content management industry's only, as far as we know, and best news commentary show.
You got it.
How you doing?
I am good, thank you, sir. Very good.
You couldn't be better right now.
You know what? You're right. That's an even better. You one up me. I could not be better now.
That's great, and we'll talk about that as the show goes on, why you're so great right now. You're like Tony the Tiger in Frosted Flakes. I'm great! How about today's subject? This is a great subject, the Internet of Things. When we're talking about everything from refrigerators to cars to beyond appliances and things like that, what's really important about this subject on CMS Connected today to me with the Internet of Things is the industry that we're talking about and the money that's being poured into it. It is going to continue to get poured into it as an industry, right?
Tons of money, and because it's all about how do we tailor experiences and personalizing, talk about the amount of data and information and insight that should be able to be gleaned from now. What is the Internet of Things?
So you are watching CMS Connected. I'm Butch Stearns along with Scott Liewehr. This is the web content management industry's only news commentary show. Coming up on the show, as always, we've got a bevy of guests for you. As a matter of fact, we're going to have Concrete5 being reviewed in our Spotlight segment. We're also going to be joined by Chad Jones of LogMeIn, although Chad's got some news to break on this show. I'm going to tease you with that. You don't even know this, Scott.
I don't even know about this.
We're going to break some news with
Chad.
Chad.
How are you keeping me out of this?
Because I wanted you to react when he broke the news, okay?
I'll react.
Just like our audience would react, okay? So Chad will be joining us from LogMeIn. But before we begin, we would like to acknowledge our lead sponsors here on CMS Connected, and they are Falcon Software. The people at Falcon Software can provide you with expert advice and integration solutions for all your creative web design, web content management, and e-commerce, social, or mobile needs. Reach out, connect, talk to the people at Falcon Software, a lead sponsor here on CMS Connected. And Digital Clarity Group, DCG, is not only a research and advisory firm focused on navigating organizations through the digital transformation process. I would make the argument they are the leaders when it comes to navigating organizations through the digital transformation. Is that a good argument to make?
You're on fire today, brother. You're amping it up all over the place.
And for you, the viewers, our peasant, lowly viewers, I kid, I joke, we love you. Recommend to you right now, right below us as you're watching this show, you can download the video white paper, How the Right CXM Solutions Deliver Better Customer Experiences, been supplied to us by the good folks at Kentico. Again, you can download the video white paper right below us on the screen, How the Right CXM Solutions Deliver Better Customer Experiences. All right, are you ready to get started with our 5 news items off the top of this edition of CMS Connected?
I'm ready to go.
This first one's got a lot of meat on the bone, Scott.
It does.
And we need you to navigate us through the transformation process of this story, to lead us through. All right, Gartner is being sued. So let me give you the details on this one. According to a story on CMS Wire, but this is everywhere. NetScout Systems, based right here, we're in Canton, Massachusetts, they're in Westford, Massachusetts, has filed a lawsuit in Connecticut Superior Court under the Connecticut Unfair Trade Practices Act for what NetScout calls, quote, corporate defamation arising out of Gartner's information technology research business practices. They are claiming, NetScout Systems, they're not claiming, they're upset that in Gartner's IT Magic Quadrant, they named NetScout as a quote-unquote challenger, not a leader in one of its Magic Quadrant industry reports. And what they are claiming here is pretty bold. Gartner, according to this lawsuit, quote, is not independent, objective, or unbiased, NetScout claims in the lawsuit, and its business model is extortionate by its very nature. Its substantial success is due to the worst kept secret in the IT industry, that Gartner has a pay-to-play business model that by its design rewards Gartner clients who spend substantial sums on its various services by ranking them favorably in their influential Magic Quadrant research reports, and punishes technology companies that choose not to spend substantial sums on Gartner services. Now, one other key point in this, NetScout reported in its lawsuit that it has not paid Gartner for consulting services in the past 5 years. All right, I got a bunch of questions, so let me start here, Scott. A lawsuit like this, unprecedented against Gartner?
No, not. It's happened before. Don't ask me the name of the company. It was a fairly unknown to me name of a company, but it happened a couple of years ago as well. So there actually is precedence, which is part of the reason why I think this will be thrown out.
Okay, Pay to play. It does exist in the industry. However, their claim, NetScout, that it's going to the point of corporate defamation or illegal or unethical business practices, a stretch?
So I'll actually be the one to say pay to play does exist, and as an analyst. But I'm actually not saying that it exists in a conspiratorial way. Pay to play, did the Tough Mudder recently. You have to pay to enter that. You have to pay to play. It doesn't mean that you pay to win necessarily. So the accusation of pay to play, certainly there is absolutely sometimes a relationship, a paying relationship between vendors and analysts. That happens, and I actually think that that's not a bad thing, and we can get into why that is. But essentially everything can be gamed, and what it comes down to ultimately is the integrity of the analyst. Are you making your decisions and are you giving your ratings based on just the information that you have and not based on any sort of a paying relationship? I'd say that 99% of the analysts out there are absolutely have.
So you're sort of inferring, if I hear you right, that this is no different than a journalist covering a sports team or covering an organization and writing independently, but then finding out that while they might not be doing commercials for them, they're getting paid to speaking appearances and stuff like that. It's up to you, the consumer, to decide on the integrity of that analyst? Is that what you're saying?
Look, here's the thing. What I'm saying to you is that analysts can be influenced. We're all people, right? And the claim, by the way, that this is not objective that was made in that lawsuit is actually valid. The reason that the first one was thrown out is because Gartner claims that it is, in fact, subjective. A series of reasons for making judgments doesn't necessarily make something that's subjective objective. This is opinion, and certainly analysts can be influenced, not necessarily by dollars, but by spending a lot of time with a company. And so certainly, analyst relations professionals are in fact professionals because they know how to influence people.
You're not a lawyer,
like marketers,
as far as I know, for all the hats you wear. But your opinion on NetScout's chance of winning this lawsuit, because they're claiming more than that, Scott. They're claiming that it's extortionate in nature. They're claiming that it rewards these vendors who pay and punishes people like them getting names as challengers. They get a chance to win this lawsuit?
So I don't think that they will, and it's because exactly what we said, that it is in fact subjective. Gartner has always claimed that it's subjective. They have a business model that is very transparent. That everybody knows that analysts have paying relationship with vendors. And I'd actually go even a step further. There are some analyst firms that are out there that actually do not have paying relationships with vendors. And I will be the first one to tell you that I actually think that it's not necessarily in the buyer's or the consumer's interest. And here's why. First and foremost, those are the analysts who are the least informed about the capabilities and the future roadmaps of products because they spend the least amount of time with them. Number two, they actually tend to find most of their information about the vendors from their buyers, from their clients, who, by the way, are usually in the process of moving off systems. So they actually have old and outdated information because they're looking at past versions. And then lastly, they're the least able to actually influence those vendors with that great insight that they might have about the needs and wants of buyers. So I actually think that it's in the buyer's interest to have vendors and analysts have relationships like that.
Okay, final question. How or will this affect the way Gartner does business?
You know what, I actually think that Gartner was affected either whether it was because of the first lawsuit or because of the way that Forrester has upped the ante. They've actually gotten fairly transparent about the way that they make these decisions. The MQ, you can now go and break down and see the kind of subcategories and the subjective decisions and points and stuff that were given for various portions of the factors that relate to the placement of the dot on the MQ. So as odd as it is for me, who was on here last month beating up Forrester about their recent dead wave, their experience delivery wave, and as much as I want to talk about how MQs are absolutely silly by nature and not of much worth at all to buyers, in fact they're misinforming. I actually don't think that there is a lack of integrity by either of those firms.
All right, you called it odd. I'm sure our viewers are calling it hypocritical, two-faced, whatever. You want to use the word odd. News story number 2 on this edition of CMS-Connected has to do with our good friends at Acquia and has to do with Amazon diving deep into Acquia. Interesting. We go to CMS Wire for a story on this. Amazon throwing a big chunk of change at Acquia this month. Now, this comes on the heels, I say the heels, several months ago in May. Acquia raised their latest round of cash, $50 million. So a lot of speculation in this story on CMS Wire and in the industry, perhaps with Amazon throwing a big chunk of change at Acquia this month. It wants to stake its claim in the startup that provides commercial services around the open source Drupal content management system before it goes public for their IPO, which could happen. We've been talking about their IPO for how long now? Though neither company is disclosing the size of the investment, it certainly makes their relationship more symbiotic. The story insinuates. Consider that Acquia runs on more than 8,000 AWS instances and serves more than 27 billion hits a month. Your reaction to this story that Amazon is jumping into Acquia?
Look, I think first of all, congratulations to Tom Erickson, the CEO of Acquia. He's been on a roll. I mean, he's been raising money left,
more
right,
than
and
you.
Center.
Close.
Yeah, just a little bit more. Add an extra couple zeros, yeah, for sure, before that decimal. So he's really been on a roll. They took in $50 million overall. They've explicitly gained more than $100 million, or raised more than $100 million, and this amount, as we know, has been undisclosed. So congratulations to them. I think yes, it all is in the run up to their IPO. They need to get themselves out there far and wide. I think though that. It's surprising because it's fairly unprecedented for Amazon. They only had, I think, one investment before, or two investments, not Jeff Bezos, but two other investments by Amazon themselves, and those were both in consumer-facing tools. And this is
Bezos himself bought the Washington Post.
Well, right, exactly. So Bezos has his own, investment firm, and where he's going to spend his money. But I'm saying Amazon. Yeah. Look, it's been obvious that Amazon and Acquia's interests have been aligned for a long time. As Acquia does better, so does Amazon. Not that they're certainly tied to need Acquia that badly, but nonetheless, they certainly want to see them do well. And I'm not surprised.
So dig a little deeper into that for one more point on this story. Again. You just said they don't need it. Mm-hmm. It's sort of unprecedented. So connect the dots for us. What is Amazon's real interest in Acquia here beyond the numbers of users?
I don't even know if Acquia can know that. I mean, you could make conspiracy theories, and you can say that Amazon is pitching to buy Acquia, and that this gives them insight to be able to look at have a closer look at them before maybe even purchasing them prior to them going IPO. You could say that. In fact, that Amazon is trying to own the world by getting everybody on AWS, and they want to be able to offer, Acquia as an option, whether they own them or whether they just now have a very vested interest in them, and it's, imposing on them to want to basically push everybody onto that platform. I don't think either of those is, out of the realm of possibility, but I have zero insider information.
I'll give you my shot at it, and you can shoot holes.
Go ahead, you're on fire today.
So Amazon is an experience for the consumer. It's not just buying things. It's not the transaction. It's an experience. It's how it makes you feel, right? Similarly, Drupal is that way because you become evangelical. People do, especially the developer community there, right? Yeah. So now Amazon is acquiring that experience. It might be a niche experience to some, not really when you look at the numbers. So there's the experience factor that they're commingling together. I don't know how they're
going to cover everybody blue.
I don't know.
Blue paint or whatever.
Smurfs everywhere?
Everywhere, all over everybody.
News item number 3 on this edition of CMS Connected has to do with the latest acronym. Oh, in the CMS space, we use acronyms and buzzwords. So Scott, the latest acronym and buzzword is CaaS. And this story on CMS Report is about content as a service, CaaS. That's the latest buzzword. And in the story it says, it's true the industry has a terminology overload. CMS Report again with the story, but it's for this reason especially that when they come around, game-changing concepts need to be explored and identified, and that content as a service, or CaaS, is one such game changer. So the question is it time to take content as a service seriously? By the way, I have our own acronym for this show. It's SABAS, Scott and Butch as a service. You think we can monetize that? SABAS? What do you think?
I think that's great.
Table that. We'll answer that at the end of the show.
I'm just going to stay over here and be quiet and just let you roll, man, because you are on one.
Should we take content as a service seriously? Aren't people doing it already? Or is it the latest buzzword that just, come on?
No, I actually like this term because it's fairly self-explanatory. As a matter of fact, Robert Rose even helped the authors of this article to come up with that term. I think, who's on my team. I like it a lot, and I've used it in a number of situations. Basically, again, when we're talking about, and we've had this conversation before, Butch, too, even at the beginning of the year when my predictions for the year were that web content management would start to get back to its roots a little bit, and we would start to value this notion of the separation of content from presentation. And this basically is that. It's basically saying that to be able to publish content anywhere, anytime, from any particular CMS to any particular presentation layer is a great thing. And partly for some of the 5 reasons that they put up there, one of them being this whole notion of the omni-channel world, as much as I hate that term, but that there are many outputs and many various presentations and form factors and that sort of stuff. And the other thing is that, again, we've said this before, I don't think it should be required that an organization have like one CMS. There's some folks who are going to be using a system extremely in a very complex way to support fairly complex processes and life cycles, and in other times they barely have to use a system once every so often. And so they can have very different interfaces, use different CMSs, and still be able to publish.
One more comment on this one. One of those 5s was personalization as needed, and you've talked about this many times on the show. When it comes to content and when it comes to personalization, brands, companies want to personalize their experiences, whether it's B2B or B2C. So that one's a key one to me. Again, when needed.
Exactly, and I think it's important that part of the reason for that prediction that I made at the outset of the year was because as these phase 2s of companies' projects, where first they bought a CMS that was shiny and was going to bring them personalization, they go and implement it, and they ended up putting the personalization idea off into some phase 2. That as those actually start to gain traction and gain legs, that folks are going to find that for those systems where they didn't have this nice separation, it's going to be more difficult actually to be able to publish any item of content to any particular persona if you don't have this notion of separation.
This next news item story on this edition of CMS Connected has to do, and I want you to follow with me on this one, Scott. Have you ever researched the hottest Kates?
The hottest?
Yes, it's a celebrity.
Kates.
It's an ongoing celebrity discussion about Kate Upton, Kate Beckinsale, Kate Hudson, Katy Perry, if you want to add it in. And it's a good debate that's ongoing, right? So this next story, to me, sort of ties into that.
Man.
So
pop culture and CMS, you are just bringing the two together.
So this story is that WordPress, Joomla, and Drupal are not the best CMS systems yet. In conventional wisdom, they're always recommended by many publications, and that they're almost default. Oh, you got to use WordPress, you got to use Joomla, or you got to use Drupal. For example, let's pull up this full screen, and this is this is written by Mike Johnston from CMS Critic, and he says, as a matter of fact, they're not the best CMS on the market necessarily. So, for example, the exchange on websites, popular websites like Quarry and whatever, might be something like this. If the question goes out, what CMS should I use? You would get 3 similar responses like this. Oh, definitely Joomla. It's the best. WordPress all the way. Drupal is way better. I suggest taking a look at it. According to Mike Johnston from CMS Critic, this type of blind recommendation not only adds no value to a conversation, but does nothing but further confuse the person who was asking the question in the first place. In this single question, without any qualification of what this user needs or wants from a CMS, 3 completely different systems with different strengths and weaknesses are all recommended as the one to be. Again, like the hottest Kate's arguments, you're not going deep enough to find out what individually they all have to offer.
Yes.
Didn't you buy that analogy?
I buy it. It's the first I've heard of this whole...
Oh yeah, you got to go there.
Is that right?
Oh yeah.
Kate Upton, hashtag I can follow?
Kate Upton is the leader in the clubhouse.
I'm so bad with those names. I don't even know who celebrities are. I can't even tell you who Kate Upton is.
It's okay.
But anyways, let's talk CMS for a second, shall we? So I have a little bit of a struggle with this one because, Mike, I love you, dude. I like what you do here, but you actually even point out the hypocritical nature of you saying this, and I don't think you give a reasonable answer, which is that to have a best CMS for the enterprise, best CMS for the mid-market as categories for a kind of People's Choice Award, and to promote those awards and give people badges to put on their website makes it fairly difficult for me to believe that you actually don't agree with the whole best CMS idea. I don't either, which is why I've never liked even various shades of being a best, like the 2x2s by Gartner and Forrester. So I agree that there is no best. Not only, as you quote our mutual friend Adrian Blum, not only is there not a best for anyone, there's not a best for everyone. There's not a best for anyone either, because there are plenty of flavors of this. But I just think that it is fairly hypocritical to have all these Best CMS for the Enterprise awards on CMS Critic, and then to go and say that there's no best.
Yeah, I don't know, Mike Johnston. You do, so I'll just. You said hypocritical. I'll just say obvious. I mean, they're predominantly regarded as the top 3 CMS systems, right? But so what he's sort of doing is taking on the establishment or the people that are out there that are always, as a default, recommending all 3 of them. But isn't it obvious that they are the top 3? They might not be the right one for all of it, but it's almost become a default.
His claim isn't that they're not necessarily the most popular. He's basically saying that the folks who kind of follow allegiance to them or have this allegiance to them are out promoting that they're the best. And I think anybody would do that from some camp. You wear a brand and you're going to wear that to every party. So I don't think there's an issue with that. I agree with him, though. There certainly isn't necessarily the best. I think he does a fairly good job pointing out some really good reasons and arguments, though, within the article. He points out a really good point about the whole notion of plugins and extensions, that even though some of these kind of former self-proclaimed blogging platforms who now want to proclaim the CMS and wear the CMS label are limited oftentimes by the plugins themselves, which burden the system, slow them down, and make for challenge for users in general. So he makes some good arguments, and I agree that there is no best. But in the same way that there is no best overall, there's also no best for the enterprise, because what the heck is the enterprise? So yeah, I disagree. I mean, I agree all around, I guess.
News item number 5 on this edition of CMS Connected has to do with the subject of our show as we lead into our guest, Chad Jones from LogMeIn, will be with us momentarily. It's the Internet of Things. Now, in this one, in my short time as a yapper here in the CMS industry, Scott, one of the things I've learned beyond the fact that the acronyms abound and buzzwords abound is that phrases abound also, and this is a good one. The perfect nexus of forces. That's what they're calling it, according to this story on CMS Wire, citing recent research from IDC that talks about the Internet of Things. And the story goes on to say, now that we've accepted the idea of the Internet of Things, researchers are starting to look at when, where, how, and why, and who will use it. So this recent research from IDC, for example, shows that retailers are leading the charge to the Internet of Things and the quest for better customer experiences. And when we talk about all the buzzwords that we talk about in CMS and in marketing today, digital marketing, customer experience management, customer relationship management, e-commerce, mobile technologies, according to CMS Wire, they're all coming together with the Internet of Things to, again, provide an almost perfect nexus of forces. That sounds deep.
It does sound deep. I can't be the one to translate that, though.
Okay, then go where you want with this.
Yeah. So, no, I think we're going to get into this today, and this is a great topic. I think there's one really good point. Actually, I'm fairly surprised at the numbers, at the growth that, from I think 2009 to 2020 or 2011 to 2020, over 9 years, that's only going to grow from 2.5 billion devices to 30 billion. There must be, 30 billion is a hard number to even comprehend, but there must be some limit on the number of devices that are even in the world that could have this, because that doesn't seem like crazy exponential growth as I'd assume that it would be like double over a year or something. But anyways, that aside, I think there's a really good point made in the article here that essentially, and this applies not just to the Internet of Things, but it applies to kind of across the board, that as we individually, in whichever, whether it's in the retail industry or whatever paradigm that we're working within, context that we're working within, that as our experiences improve, that our expectations for every experience to be similar to that start to change and start to rise. And so therefore, even if it's, retail might be kind of out in front of putting our, Internet of Things to use, across the board, that will quickly permutate all industries as any experience that a consumer has anywhere starts to become the experience they want to have everywhere. So I think that's a very valid point.
Scott Liewehr of Digital Clarity Group. I'm Butch Stearns of the Pulse Network. You are watching CMS Connected. We are talking about the Internet of Things, advanced connectivity, advanced communications, and the effect on the CMS industry. That is our subject. Chad Jones joins us next, right after a couple of words from Kentico. We're back with more on CMS Connected after this.
So you've got a great website. Your marketing team spends hours driving visitors to it and nurturing them into leads. And your sales team spends hours collecting, qualifying, organizing, and chasing those leads. Sales wants to focus on what they do best. Selling. And marketing wants to get on with what they do best, creating innovative campaigns. But how do you make both teams happy? The solution is marketing automation.
Businesses today demand a powerful web content management and online marketing platform that can provide the best value at an affordable price with unlimited website possibilities. Kentico, the .NET Enterprise Marketing Solution and web content management platform of choice, powers more than 12,000 websites in over 84 countries, which means you get a stable, well-tested solution. Fully loaded with over 350 web parts and controls and more than 80 extensible modules. Kentico provides you with a fully integrated solution for building your online presence and running successful online marketing campaigns. It allows you to quickly launch an effective B2B or B2C site, intranet, online store, or branded online community, fully integrated with Facebook and Twitter. Test drive Kentico EMS today to get a complete appreciation of all its powerful features and capabilities.
So you've got a great website with hundreds, maybe even thousands of visitors. That's great, but each one has their own background, interests, motivations, and goals. But you are showing them all the same content. Not very clever. The solution is content personalization, allowing you to deliver the right message to the right person at the right time in the right form. So let's see how content personalization works.
Everybody, welcome back to CMS-Connected, the web content management industry's only news commentary show. On the far left is Scott Liewehr. I'm Butch Stearns of the Pulse Network, and Chad Jones is joining us. Chad, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Butch.
Now, I billed you off the top from LogMeIn, but we've got some breaking news here. What's the breaking news?
We do, and you're going to hear it first here, but I am Batman. Okay, no, I'm just kidding. Actually, I come from an entrepreneurial background. I've done about 9 different startups. I've been through successful acquisitions to Microsoft, Citrix, VMware, and a few other companies.
Sure.
Starting the Xively platform to enable this whole Internet of Things trend has been an amazingly rewarding experience, but the siren song of the startup has grabbed my heart. So I am leaving LogMeIn with a bit of a heavy heart, but a tip of the cap to a great company. And moving on to a stealth mode right now on the next great startup on the Internet of Things.
Digital Clarity Group is always looking for somebody like you, Chad. So yeah, we can do after the show. I'll broker this. I only want 10%.
Interesting.
So we can work. Yeah, that's all. For the introduction on this. Yeah. Break it simply. So you're no longer with LogMeIn. Let's go right to the subject of the show, the Internet of Things. I guess the very general question I have for you is when you hear that phrase, the Internet of Things, what first comes to mind for you? What's the most interesting thing tied to the CMS space? What comes to your mind with it?
Well, the most interesting first is it's a hyped term. We're pretty much at the top of the hype cycle from Gartner on what the Internet of Things means. And you hear many different terms for it: Internet of Everything, Industrial Internet, Internet of Services, all of those things. But at the end of the day, you're really looking at taking our physical world and through really cheap sensors and actuators, being able to allow that to be addressed directly from software over the internet. So in the past, you kind of had to have a carbon-based subjective sensor. You know, that's really us, right? You know, sitting in the middle to see if my refrigerator broke, and you know, then get a reactive call into somebody. But you know, if it's Memorial Day and 4 days later, my chicken's bad. Okay, it maybe cost me $50 because my freezer went down. But if I have a
chicken,
it is, well, you know, yeah, you gotta stay healthy, you know. But if you have a scientific freezer that has $200,000 worth of stuff, you know, that is inside of it and it goes down, that's a really expensive thing to have happen. And so being able to predictively look at when's a freezer going to go down, get ahead of the service chain, all of those things, you know, that's a really exciting part of this. But that requires taking that physical world and get that objective data into our business systems. So I think it's an exciting time, you know, to be sure, but it's going to change everything we know.
So while, you know, and I agree with you and with Gartner that, you know, this is at the very top of the hype cycle in terms of being talked about what its potential is.
Right.
Where do you think we are in terms of tapping into that so far? I mean, is this, I think we're seeing more and more proclivity to include, you know, web-based access to whatever these things are, but how much are folks actually leveraging that insight and data and whatever is being made available?
Right. So I heard a term from one of the analysts the other day, and they called the whole industry embryonic. I think that's a good way to look at it. It's supposed to be a $19 trillion market by 2020, and anything greater than the gross domestic product of the United States economy is pretty exciting. I hope it's a fraction of that, you know. But I think people are interested in the concept, but a lot of people are stuck in let's internet connect something. And that doesn't give a lot of value to reach the full potential of what we've been talking about. It's really about we're transforming everything in our world. So the idea that, well, wait a minute, we need to step back and think about things in a business term. This is a business enablement tool, yet another one in the arsenal, but a very important one. So how is business going to really take effect if all of a sudden I can get any sort of dark data that's out there and have that made available to me? What would that mean, right? So I think the industry is now starting to understand a little bit of that and starting to understand how do we tie those into those business cases and really maximize that TCO.
Sure. So, I mean, it's funny how, you know, the Internet of Things as a very hyped term is fueling the big data, which is another big hyped term as it continues to basically add to the necessity for the notion of big data, right? Being able to actually even make sense of all of this stuff. We're only compounding the data issue,
Right, well, we're just stuffed with data, right? Awash in data, if you will.
Crazy.
And it's only getting worse and worse.
Growing exponentially.
But I think big data is an interesting term because big data, we think of, well, there's all this data coming in, it must be this big data problem we have to analyze and all that. And in some cases that's true. The industrial internet, GE, aircraft engines, yes, there's tons of data. Oil and gas, the double eagle platform, 256,000 sensors, a terabyte a day of data, right? There's certainly those category of things. But I think what's more important is relevant data. If I have terabytes and terabytes, petabytes of data, but nothing's relevant to my business, then what's the meaning? But on the other side of that, you know, there were some examples of customers out there. There's one called New England Biolabs with a connected freezer for scientific enzymes, things like that. If they have more than gigabyte of data, you know, a year, I'd be shocked. But the data that's coming inside of that is incredibly valuable to that business. Now, is that a big data thing? Not really. If we're talking about the sheer, you know, really big data means the volume of data. But we're really meaning that we have the relevancy of that data because when somebody buys something, that's a really important thing. Freezer telling me all of a sudden it's not okay, you know, that's really important too, you know, with all the stock levels that we have in there.
Absolutely.
You are watching CMS-Connected. Butch Stearns, Scott Liewehr, Chad Jones is joining us, formerly of LogMeIn, breaking that news on this edition of CMS-Connected. We're talking about the Internet of Things, and while we're on big data, my question to both of you guys is what effect the evolution of the Internet of Things will have on big data, because you mentioned the problem of big data. I'll call it the challenge of big data, and I couldn't agree with you more. I think it's the term's right, meaning the right information in the right hands of the right people at the right time. That's always the biggest challenge of big data. So how does the evolution of the Internet of Things, does it make that challenge harder or easier?
Well, it's interesting. I think that some of it will become easier because you have access to data. Right. Like again, in that example, you know, all of a sudden, just a little bit of information is really going to drive a tremendous amount of business action and relevancy, right? But I think that more data will, as we take it in now, eventually systems will be able to deal with those sorts of things. You see on the analytics side a huge amount of work and startups coming around that are actually dealing with these things in both structured and unstructured ways to be able to get more meaning out of that data as they go forward. It's almost like cryogenic suspension in a way. I'm going to freeze somebody, but I don't know how to bring them back today, but in 50 years, maybe I'll know how to do that. Yeah. And I think it's the same thing. Let's get all the data in, and then eventually analytics will be able to come around and give us more meaning on top of it.
Well, you'd like to believe, I guess, Scott, that in the, you know, part of the Internet of Things to me is machine-to-machine communication. So therefore, when we grew up, it was HAL 2000, but it really is. It's machines thinking like humans to sift through the right data while we're on the big data part of this and get it in the right systems. The right hands might be a CRM system or whatever, marketing tools, automation, things like that, right? So it's just, It really is interesting because all the things we heard about as kids are now right here in front of us.
Yeah, it's really crazy, some of the applications of how this stuff is being used today and what it's going to do. I think it's going to transform not only the way that businesses operate and do business to be able to make them far more efficient. It's going to also, as you said, as you start to tap into some of the relevancy of all that data, is it certainly this notion of personalization and tailoring the experience to any particular individual. Now this notion of context that we talk about even on the web world for content folks, they talk about context. Talk about context of the Internet of Things world. I mean, you can actually really be able to tap into what they're doing, where they are, allow them to interact with things around them, machines interacting with each other. I think it's just really crazy. So the application of this is and the potential for it, I would say is crazy.
Yeah, it really is. One side of this, though, that I think we'll have to see an evolution in is really the idea of interconnectedness. Mm-hmm. So today you have a lot of companies that are building solutions that are just siloed. Fitbit, for example. Great, I have this information about how much I'm running around, steps, all of those things. Heart rate monitors, great. I'm a triathlete, I know exactly what my heart rate was over time. But we barely have time with our doctors as it is today. And in that 5 to 7 minutes that we have, instead of telling someone, well, I think something kind of hurts, and they guess, and do some blood workup, wouldn't it be better if all of a sudden they had all of your quantified self data that you brought with them, and they could see through an analytics play, well, it looks like your cholesterol is a little high because I've been monitoring it all year, or your heart rate has a little bit of an anomaly, and then eventually, wouldn't it be great if a connected lab could get that anonymized information and start tailoring research based on that. And then your caregiver, as you just said, who's doing preventative, understands that. And then if you have a crisis situation and you go to the hospital, all of that information would be available then right to the doctor at the point in time that could save your life. Sure. And then be able to say, oh, well, here's where these anomalies were, so I know this is more of a heart-related problem, something like that. Yeah. And all of those things coming together is really going to enable that enlightened future.
Yeah.
How will this, one of the claims is in the Internet of Things, how it will usher in automation in all industries now. You guys talk about that. Will it, and how will it? I mean, from an industry perspective, this industry continues to grow. There's billions and billions of dollars being put into it. If I am in the automation end of the business, I'm smiling, but there's a challenge for me to get some of those dollars. How? Will this usher in automation in all industries, the Internet of Things?
Well, I think automation in general is the key to some of these things. Now, we have a lot of automation in business today, and automation just isn't around the physical side of things, like in a manufacturing plant or anything like that. It's in business systems as well. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of workflow and those types of things that exist inside of business today, but again, a human has to be the one to kick that off and put in subjective information. So as the information comes in from objective data sources on the Internet of Things, it's just going to start kicking off the automation workflows in any sort of thing, whether it's a business workflow that just does a software response type of thing, or it's actually kicks off a completely separate physical process that goes on, or it even gets to the point where the environment automatically reacts to you. So we all have a phone in our pocket, right now, and that's basically the digital expression of ourselves. Right, to steal a little bit from the Matrix, shamelessly. So as we move through the world, that's our identity. So imagine the world just as you walk into a room, lights turn on, the doors unlock, windows come up, and everything gets to your preference because it understands who you are because of that.
Yeah, but we don't, Chuck, quite honestly, we don't have to imagine that. It's here.
Yeah. Sure.
I mean, and it's not just at CES anymore. The last 2 years going to the Consumer Electronics Show, you'd walk into the connected home and that would happen. That happens in people's houses now. Right? So it's no, I'm not ripping you. I'm saying imagine it. You said imagine it. We can.
Right.
Because it is happening. Yeah. So again, from a CMS perspective, from an industry perspective, what does that mean? Advance the equation here.
Yeah, sure. So from the CMS perspective, I think the point that you make about automation is an important one. We talked earlier on the show about content as a service and that whole idea.
Yeah.
This comes again, when we're talking about content as a service, whether or not most businesses are making use of that kind of separation of content from presentation. The reason for my prediction about that whole idea is because there will be more and more need to actually put that to have that underlying way of managing content be ready for the future. And here's an example, a perfect use case for it. Automation, in order to be able to have any sort of an automation, you have to be ready to receive that. You have to have so if, for example, Internet of Things can be both information and insight that is sent to a system based on, it's a sensory object, right, that can send information, maybe about a context of where I am. Well, does a CMS, is a person who's managing the content in their system, are they describing that content well enough so that they can provide then the most appropriate content back given that sensory information that's available? Can they actually respond in a way that's going to make their personalization meaningful to that person? If you said that, if it shows obviously that I'm in the book section of whatever thing, do I have content that I can show that I can use that's valuable, that makes it more relevant for them? And then by the same token, can I push back content in a way that a presentation on a device that's an internet connected device, can I push content to that device as a new form factor type as I'm pushing to different presentations? Same sort of thing. So that's where this whole idea of content as a service really starts to get put to use, is in things like Internet of Things.
Well, imagine this as well. The augmented reality type of segment is really interesting, especially around advertising. So there is a billboard in one of the London Underground, and as the trains come in, it's a woman that's standing there, and her hair's, she's got long hair, and as the train comes in, the wind of the train, it detects that and starts to up the content, so her hair starts to blow as the train comes in, and the trains come in at different times and various things. So it's actually a sensor that changes the experience around it, and then of course that draws somebody's eye, and that impression from that advertising is far greater on top of that. Imagine if you will, a digital billboard that could detect the rate of traffic, and if the traffic's flowing around, you're doing 80 miles an hour. 65 miles an hour, of course, the speed limit. The content is much quicker because you have a very short impression window. But if you're stuck in traffic, and I've got 20, 30 seconds to look at that, then the content's longer, almost like a mini commercial. That impression is an opportunity. Is an opportunity to have a much deeper impression on that and switch the content based on conditions.
Exactly, all right. But the whole point of managing that content in the first place for the folks in the CMS world here is that you've got to be prepared for the sensory information to know whether or not to call up that long form advertisement or the short form or whatever.
Absolutely.
You've got to have that ready to receive those signals and be able to then provide back quickly a response.
So let's finish up with this thought. Chad, great conversation here, and continued success. For you, my friend. You already talked about cool use cases. There's the Nest thermostats, which people always talk about now as a model for the way business is done. A Fitbit you brought up before. One of the questions to end is about what the future is going to look like. I think we already went there. Let's talk about let's finish with a thought from both of you about the Internet of Things, and when it comes to the CMS industry, how it's going to change things. I'll make a statement. One of my thoughts is that, which I think would be refreshing for you, that more and more the value of analysis of research and data becomes even more important, because what you feed in to the Internet of Things might be the start of an engine that allows what you can attract for new customers, leads, and things like that, whether it's a business system or whatever. I guess my direct question to both of you is this. Give me something we haven't talked about in the Internet of Things and how it's going to affect the CMS industry, whether it's going to create new revenue streams for companies, what's going to become more important for companies. How do you react to that question, Chad?
Right. Well, I think that, first of all, technology for technology's sake that does not serve a higher business order principle is really doomed to mediocrity or failure. So, first of all, really thinking through what these things can do for you at a high end is going to be critical, paramount importance.
Even more important than ever.
More important than ever, because we have seen some spectacular successes and some spectacular failures inside of the Internet of Things along those lines, because the business cases weren't fully thought through. But from a perspective of how does it actually change everything, I think, from walking into a store and how advertising's done, the Minority Report future, that is well within our grasp right now. Understanding medical and interaction with our doctors, huge. Understanding how we interact with our cars and how that connected automobile world is going to change everything, and our safety and all of those things. But also being a little bit worried about, there is PRISM and the NSA out there, that can look at things. And if our whole world is wired up and being monitored, can that be used for maybe nefarious purposes? So all of these things, we have to be vigilant on. But also, it's an exciting future because we're fundamentally going to change how we discover, interact, and understand our world.
I think I like that it introduces the idea of the potential for content to be far more than just a marketing function in a business, as it often kind of is, and as we even talk about it here. marketing and is certainly near the tip of the spear when it comes to customer experience. But when we think about all of the interactions that an actual customer can have with any sort of an organization, whether it be a hotel that I walk into or whatever, there are many of those other experiences that are not necessarily marketing driven, right? And we can improve that experience of customers by really becoming really good at our craft of managing content, to be able to provide this, receive these signals, provide effective content that helps that customer's experience improve overall, regardless of it being a marketing related nature.
Chad, thanks for your time. Where can people get a hold of you?
You can follow me on Twitter at CloudJones, and that's probably the best way to get a hold of me.
Okay, great. Thanks for coming.
Thank you very much. Appreciate
it. Chad Jones. Time now for our Spotlight segment on CMS-Connected. And in our Spotlight segment, we are going to review Concrete5. Let me tell you a little bit about Concrete5. In today's episode of the Spotlight, Concrete5 was founded in 2008 as an open source content management system. They have head offices in Portland, Oregon. They have 50 employees. The CMS for Concrete5 was designed for ease of use, for users with minimum of technical experience, so a pleasant user experience, and it enables users to edit site content directly from the page. It also provides version management for every page, similar to wiki software, and allows users to edit images through an embedded editor on the page. Joining us via Skype right now for a more in-depth review of Concrete5 is Dean Whillier from Quarry Integrated Communications. Dean, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Butch. It's good to be on.
Yeah, great to have you. Before we get into Concrete5, quick brief synopsis of you and QIC, Quarry Integrated Communications. For people that don't know you, what are you all about?
We are a marketing advertising agency that do all kinds of work for various B2B clients. I lead a group of developers. I'm the assistant director of digital solutions here at Quarry. So we do all kinds of CMS related and other types of web projects. Great.
Well, glad to have you on the show, Dean, in this edition of the Spotlight segment. So Concrete5, what's the platform all about in your opinion?
Well, as you already indicated, they started a while ago. They actually started as a closed source platform many years before, but with their fifth major release, they went open source. The platform is based on PHP and MySQL, just like some of the big three open source platforms out there. As you also indicated, the user experience is probably one of the bigger selling features, allowing for simple in-context WYSIWYG editing. It has a low technical barrier to entry, so you can set up a site and have your content management person with Word-like experience be able to manage the content of the site. So it's developed using an MVC architecture. I won't get into too many technical details, but that basically means it's quite a flexible and scalable platform.
So a little bit deeper on some of the products and services, and in your opinion, the more unique, if you will, benefits and features of Concrete5.
Sure, a few things. So flexible content areas, a number of different CMSs have some challenges with being able to be flexible, to be able to meet the designs that you're looking for in this day and age. It used to be the web was just a page of type and text that you would put in. And so some CMSs that grew up in that day and age, you're kind of stuck with that without integrating some more complex plugins. But right out of the box, Concrete5 supports that already. So you can define pretty much any area that you need in your design to be an area that you can add content to, and you can have multiple of those on the screen. There are also things called view overrides, which allow you to, with the different add-ons that come in the core or you get from the marketplace, to create different views. So you can have, using one plugin, have multiple representations of the content for that plugin in different places on your site. It supports the ability for doing something called stacks, which is basically allowing you to create sections of content that you can then share on different sections of your site without having to reduplicate that content. So you can go back, you can make changes to a stack, and those changes are then reflected across the site. As you also mentioned, there's the ability of built-in content versioning. It maintains a history of all the changes you make to every single individual page, which also allows for commenting, so you can go back and kind of see what changed, what happened, and it also allows you to be able to quickly revert to a previous page if need be, if you find something didn't quite work out as anticipated. There's a lot of different things. Another one would be interesting is the marketplace integration. It allows you, a person who's editing the site, to be able to download and add plugins to the site directly from your website rather than having to go to Concrete5's marketplace, download it to your own hard drive, FTP into your server, and then upload the file. So it's, again, ease of use is key there.
We're talking with Dean Whillier of Quarry Integrated Communications in the Spotlight segment on this edition of CMS Connected, and we're reviewing Concrete5. Dean, you did a good job talking about the unique features and benefits, some of the products and services that Concrete5 offers. So, two very specific questions, strengths and weaknesses. Let's start with the strengths. In your opinion, what are some of the best strengths of what Concrete5 has to offer?
So, I mean, Brady talked about it a bit, is the user experience, I think, is one of the key strengths of the platform, at least for us, in my experience with Concrete5 over the years. Users and our clients are very appreciative of being able to go and experience the site and edit the site in context with inline editing. It doesn't require having to have a different mind map while looking at a form, in a back-end system, trying to guess what that's going to be looking like on the final site. You can go to the page you want. You can throw it into edit mode and edit the content with very little fuss. It's a very flexible system, so I've talked about the user experience, but from a development standpoint, the architecture is flexible enough that, and has been built in such a way that you can build many kinds of different websites. Some CMSs, open source otherwise, are focused on certain areas like blogging or intranet or purely social. Concrete5 has tried to build a system that allows you to be flexible, so you can do any one of those, or perhaps even integrate all of those together into that single system. And it has probably one of the other key things is a very quick ramp-up time, both from an editing standpoint and from a development standpoint.
And weaknesses, main weaknesses?
So as a lot of people would probably also indicate with some of the other platforms, open source platforms, PHP is what the language is written in, which is viewed generally as a bit of a slower language. But so while that's the case, Concrete5 has, just like the other ones, done a decent job, a very good job in recent months of caching and setting up individual page caching that can be controlled on a per page level to kind of deal with that challenge. And so you can actually still, despite PHP's slower, runtime compiling, it allows you to still have some very fast websites with high traffic. So it has a bit of a smaller, though definitely growing, and community very quickly growing. It's not quite at the level of Drupal or Joomla or WordPress, but it is definitely growing. So that could be one thing. It doesn't have much in the way yet for smartphone editing capabilities, except that I believe that some of the new enterprise tools that they've released, which I haven't had a chance to explore yet, are supposed to help answer that question. And perhaps in some people's view, paid themes or add-ons on their marketplace. It's a different setup to your usual open source CMS. There are free add-ons and themes as well. Personally, I kind of like the idea, because what that does mean is that there's a bit more onus on the developers of these add-ons who are paying for them to actually make sure that they work properly. So,
final questions, Dean. Who should be using Concrete5 in your opinion, and who's their competition?
So again, because of its flexibility, really it can have a potentially a wide audience. I think it might still suffer from not being as well known as some of the Drupals and Joomlas, etc. But because of the user experience, it's a very low technical barrier to entry. Has good balance between needing to control the site's brand while still being able to give the publishers who are writing the content, adding content, the freedom that they need to do so. So anyone who needs to have a system that allows for people that have Word-like experience in editing content, this is a great platform for that. And anyone who also needs to be able to build sites that have good brand control, it's also good for that kind of a thing. So, and then you said competition. So obviously the usual open source aspects of Drupal, Joomla, and WordPress, they're much more well known out there. I would say that because you can use Concrete5 for small sites all the way up to larger enterprise sites, you probably find that in some companies, Oracle and Other platforms like CQ5, which might be in some ways more capable, would also be a competition for Concrete5 because they are starting to push into the enterprise space with some of their enterprise tools.
So Dean, to finish up, I know the answer to this question is that it depends on the client and it depends on the customization and needs that people have. But sounds like for your review, thumbs up or thumbs down, that it's a thumbs up for Concrete5.
Totally.
Okay, great. So Dean Whillier from Quarry Integrated Communications. Dean, thanks for being a part of this episode of CMS Connected.
Thanks for having me.
All right, that is our spotlight segment on this edition of CMS Connected. Time now for our final segment of the show. It is Rapid Fire, where we put Scott Liewehr on the clock, 60 seconds. I'll read a headline, a catchy headline, if you will, give some facts on the story, and then Scott makes sense of it all for us in a nice little packaged, with a bow around it, 60-second analysis. Are you ready, my friend?
Well, as ready as I'm going to be.
This is what you get paid the big bucks to do.
It all comes down to this?
It comes down to this.
The whole rest of the show means
You
nothing.
came in here today telling me you're on fire. Well, you got to prove it right now. This is rapid fire.
Game time.
Okay, you ready?
Let's go.
Start with our first story in rapid fire. Social CMS, if you will, almost as a question. Huh? In a story in fierce content management, as businesses continue to struggle over what to do with content and documents created within the four walls of their organization, now it turns out they also may need to maintain records of conversations and communications that take place in all places over social media. Again, story in fierce content management. We're calling this social CMS. In some industries, of course, there are e-discovery and governance issues that play to necessitate a complex array of vetting and approval procedures for compliance purposes. So, Scott, is it time for a separate CMS for social media now because of this?
So I do not think that it is time, by any stretch. I mean, if you look at what a CMS does, is it manages content objects, and social media is no different than that. And if I can channel, my colleague Christian Walker, who emphasizes both governance as well as records management, I think he'd want to say that this is just a records and a retention issue, and that governance is required. So first, I think it's good to raise this point that social media, like any other form of content or output by an organization, in many industries, especially those that are regulated, that information is discoverable, and that's why there's been, frankly, a little bit of a slowdown of some of those to want to go jump into the social foray. But like anything, it is content. It can be managed. It can be managed by systems that are already in place today, and I don't think we need to go worry about building new social management systems. There's enough of that out there. So I say no.
Rapid fire story number 2 in this edition of CMS Connected. Early access is the title of the story, excuse me. And it has to do with Sitecore Commerce. Sitecore has launched what it calls an early access program for Sitecore Commerce. Sitecore says it's the first enterprise class .NET customer experience management solution with fully integrated commerce functionality. The company claims that Sitecore Commerce will help facilitate marketers and merchandisers to deliver personalized and relevant digital shopping experiences from initial customer acquisition all the way through online transaction using a single connected platform. Now, Scott, didn't Sitecore sign up with another commerce company, Active Commerce, but they shelved it? Why? Why did they do that? Do you know?
Is this part of my 60 seconds?
Well, you don't. That's a separate one. No, I won't count down.
Active Commerce is still in place. It's a commerce platform that's built on the Sitecore platform. As Sitecore can be extended to all sorts of things, but no, it doesn't decrease that relationship whatsoever. It just gives them kind of a native capability out of the box that they'll be selling.
Bonus rapid fire right there.
Yeah,
Bonus rapid fire.
So I should get some credit for that one.
60 seconds.
Do I get some credit?
Yes, you get credit. Check mark.
Let's do it.
What about Sitecore Commerce? What about early access? What's your analysis?
Yeah, so I think, first of all, some comments in general. Look at that, my collar's all messed up. Thanks for telling me, Butch. So I think, first of all, I like this announcement in general by Sitecore. We've talked about the Sitecore Commerce before in the past. So yes, it's an early release to folks because certainly Sitecore very much depends on its developer community. They have a very large developer community, especially for a commercial vendor like them. And so I think here, this early access is going to allow developers to really tap into a few of the key characteristics of this. Number one is to bring personalization to commerce. Something that's fairly rarely found is that you can personalize content around a cart experience, but to actually personalizing the buying experience is fairly difficult. Second, bringing analytics and that capability into the commerce experience is also, while it's there and rare, to be able to tailor that into the rest of the site is different. And then the real-time nature of this and how Sitecore has expanded with their massive release, the ability to tap into big data, I think is pretty transformational. So it's good to give these folks access to it early.
Story number 4 in rapid fire in this edition of CMS-Connected. Story number 3, excuse me, is titled Shutdown Averted. By the way, folks, Near's Goldschlager. Scott, Pat, Teddy in the booth. Can we have a round of applause for Near's Goldschlager?
That is
Could we? You know why?
That's one of my drinks that's off the cart because I had a bad experience with it in college. So
you have fun with that name if you want, my friend, but we need watchdogs in this world.
We do.
And Near's Goldschlager, a security researcher for Salesforce.com's product security team, caught this potential bug and a shutdown was averted. So you laugh all you want, my friend. You name your drinks after him because this is a name you're going to be hearing from in the future. The message a few weeks back to millions of users of WordPress and Drupal content management systems: fire up those security updates after Near's was watching and found this potential bug. The web content management system providers released security updates this week after Near tipped them off to a potential attack that could have shut down websites and servers running on WordPress and Drupal all over the world. So you name your drinks after him if you want. Give him some credit, my friend. He is on my wall of fame right now.
Oh boy. So I think this will bring the open source critics out of the woodwork once again to go point fingers and proclaim how the likes of WordPress and Joomla and Drupal are not secure and all these sorts of things. Frankly, that's FUD. It's fair game, but it's FUD. I think actually this is an example of where the open source community in all 3 of those communities was able to react very quickly, provide updates. There are vulnerabilities everywhere throughout many of these systems, whether proprietary or open source. So the ability for all 3 of those communities to be able to rise to the occasion, that they can have an outsider point to a challenge, be able to avert that challenge by providing an update, and then to be able to notify their entire community to be able to go upside. I don't think we saw any big downtime because of this. So you're right, bravo to him, but I think it's also not a slam on the open source community for something like this, but in fact, actually, it is in their interest to promote this point.
Near Goldschlager, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
Story number 4, consumerization on this edition of CMS Connected and Rapid Fire. And for story number 4, we go to the latest research from friend of the show, Robert Rose, thought leader in the industry, and we go to Digital Clarity Group, where Robert resides, for his latest brief called How Agencies Can Bridge Gaps for Mid-Market Success. And according to Robert, while I cite Near Goldschlager, he brings up Justin Bieber. That's why he's the thought leader. For many marketing executives in the mid-market, digital disruption is the Justin Bieber of business, according to Robert. Popular enough that they have to pay attention, but annoying enough that they wish they didn't have to. That's the perfect analogy of Justin Bieber. Robert, in this insight and in this brief, goes on to explore how marketing agencies must themselves transform to find success in acting as a bridge to the future, Scott, for these mid-market clients suffering from disruption fatigue. What in 60 seconds should we glean out of Robert's latest brief and insight and analysis?
First of all, even as a colleague, I'm always a fan of Robert's writing. He has a really great way with words, and to go put this as bluntly as he did, and his analogies are on point. So we've been talking about this for a long time, the notion of digital disruption and disruption in general, specifically of the agency and service provider industry. As we've talked about before, when Jill Finger-Gibson was on the show, the agency industry is being disrupted. That's why many buyers out there and firms, whether small or large, are less willing to turn over the keys to these large AORs and agencies of record and ask them to do everything, and they're much more open to working with smaller specialized firms who can meet their needs on specific activities. And so that's why we're seeing in response to that, the agencies gobbling up as many of these smaller firms as they can to acquire this capability. They need to change the way that they work with organizations. They need to change how they work. They need to change their offering, and they really need to kind of get with the whole program and be able to respond to this disruption in a way that's meaningful.
All right, for our next story on rapid fire here on CMS Connected, we turn to our someone we refer to often on the show, Virginia Bacchatis, senior partner at Brilliant Leap, and she states, the name of the story, by the way, is The Right Stuff, and here's why. Virginia states, it's hard to know if Alfresco CEO Doug Denenlein knew what he was getting into when he took the helm at the open source enterprise content management provider 19 months ago now. He was brought in to take the company public, and needless to say, that hasn't happened. And while for companies like Box, which filed for an IPO in March, but has not even started its roadshow thus far, the state of the stock market might be an impediment. With Alfresco, it's something else. They don't yet have the right stuff, according to Virginia. What's Virginia talking about here, Scott?
Yeah, so Virginia is referring to a fairly sore point for the Alfresco folks that they, I think, prematurely announced they were going to go IPO. They, not formally announced, but there was a lot of whispers around that. And Denenlein was brought in some time ago as well to basically help to get them over the helm. Since then, this raise, seems to indicate to her that the IPO might even be further off. It could also mean that it's near term. We don't know. We don't have any idea what they plan to do with that money. But in the same way that Alfresco, we can't, out of one side of our mouth, talk about Acquia raising money, just before and say that they're right on the track to go IPO. When here's Alfresco raising money, and that means that they're somehow off track. I'm not so sure that that's the case. I will say though that her parallel to Box and their struggles of kind of releasing their financials has made it difficult for them. I think also kind of in a similar but related industry of more of the ECM space, it's hard to stand out in that space, and it is viewed as kind of fairly old, and it's hard to gauge these other IPOs and gauge whether or not that's going to affect you and what the implication is going to be. So.
We finished this segment of Rapid Fire and this edition of CMS Connected with one of Scott's favorite companies, favorite subjects, and fairness. They are talked about a lot in the industry for all different kinds of reasons. We're talking about Box. We're talking about CEO Aaron Levie. He will host BoxWorks next week as of the live airing of this edition of CMS Connected. It's the company's biggest pep rally of a year. It's got a lineup of all-stars keynoting, including Jim Collins, the author of Good to Great, Disney's Jeff Katzenberg, and LinkedIn CEO Jeff Weiner. Is it Weiner or Weiner? I don't know the pronunciation. I think it's Weiner. And then, of course, there's Aaron Levie himself. Not only is he Inc. magazine's Entrepreneur of the Year, but he's also got celebrity-like status in Silicon Valley. Never mind his Hollywood connections to the likes of Ashton Kutcher, among others, who invested in Box himself. What's less likely to be out for display are Box's miserable finances, its delayed IPO, and talk of increasing competition from industry giants like Microsoft, Google, Citrix, Amazon, and fellow sync and share startup Dropbox. So Scott, to finish up Rapid Fire, a graceful exit, are we seeing the beginning of the end of Box here?
Beginning of the end, I don't know, and I don't follow them close enough personally to really have a strong opinion. So I did talk, however, very recently to another analyst from another firm who follows them extremely closely, and he's got high concerns about them actually, talking about how maybe even a Dropbox has a better chance of them. I'll read a quick quote from an investor where in this article they say, under the terms Box agreed to as part of its $150 million investment this month, the company must go public by July 2015 at a value of no less than $20 per share. Will be on the hook to pay penalties to investors. The question in this analyst's mind was whether or not they can actually get there that quickly if they don't burn through enough, through all their cash beforehand, and whether or not their valuation will even be that high. There's an awful lot of folks in this file sync and share market who are making headway, not just newcomers like the notion of Box and Dropbox and the innovative ones, but also the kind of big players like Documentum with their simplicity and that sort of thing. So this is a crowded market. It's tough. That particular analyst that I spoke with views them a little bit direly.
For Scott Liewehr, I'm Butch Stearns. That'll do it for this edition of CMS Connected. We would like to thank our guests Chad Jones and Dean Whillier in our Spotlight segment, and Chad chiming in about the Internet of Things. We'd also like to thank our lead sponsors, Falcon Software and Digital Clarity Group, who provide you the backbone that bring you CMS Connected on a weekly basis. Gary Eisenstein and his good folks at Falcon Software, and Scott Liewehr and his good folks at Digital Clarity Group. And of course, I am not leaving the show without thanking Nir Goldschlager from the Salesforce product security team and his contributions to the show and to the industry overall, Scott.
Amazing what this man has done.
I'm going to invest in him right now.
Go ahead.
As I know.
By the way, you said a weekly show. If this were a weekly show, man.
Did I say weekly?
You did say weekly.
Our next show comes your way the final week in September, probably September 25th, and we can pin down our men on the go here. But it'll be in the final week in September. 2 days after
the big 4-0, by the way.
The evolution of web engagement. We're talking evolution.
Do you want my address to where to send my present, my gift?
Yes, I do.
Yeah?
Send that to me.
I'll give that
But
to
for
you.
now, get connected.
Stay connected.
On CMS Connected. See you next time on CMS Connected.